If you've been white knuckling your way through adulting with ADHD, burnout, or just too many browser tabs open in your brain, I've got you. Let's hop on a free discovery call where we'll talk ADHD, purpose, and how to stop feeling like a walking to-do list. No weird sales pitches, just real talk. Fierce kindness. Book it now at youradhdguy.com. That's youradhdguy.com. Your future self will high five you for it. Yeah. Welcome to Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD, the podcast where fierce kindness meets the unfiltered truth. A one-stop shop about all things ADHD, where we smash the stigma and mystery around ADHD, depression, and the masks we wear at work and in life. I'm Ron, your ADHD guy, your guide, and your reminder that being different isn't a flaw. It's a biological advantage, a signal that you were never meant to blend in. You were built to make a difference. Here, we face the struggles that no one seems to get with heart. We unpack the chaos. We build strength through our sensitivity. We turn pain into power. Because kindness isn't weak. It's a revolution. And every time you show up for yourself, that's you taking your life back. So let's make it cool to be different. Let's make it brave. Let's make it yours. Hey friends, welcome back to Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD. This is Ron, your ADHD guy, and this is part 3 of our series of ADHD and trauma. If you missed last week's episode, I highly recommend hitting pause and going back because it really lays the groundwork for what we're diving into today. In that episode, we looked at how trauma isn't just what happens to us, but what happens inside us. We explored how moments of invalidation, being called too much or not enough, can shape our sense of self, often leading to perfectionism, people-pleasing, or a lifelong habit of self-blame. So if you haven't listened yet, go check that out. It'll make today's conversation that much more powerful. So if you ever had someone say you're lazy, irresponsible, disorganized, or maybe even that you're just too sensitive, then today's episode is for you. Because what we're really talking about is the shame cycle. How the seeds of shame get planted in childhood, how the school system often waters them, and how they bloom into lifelong patterns for those of us adults with ADHD. And here's the heart of it. What looks like a flaw is often just an adaptation. Brilliant survival strategies that we learned as kids that don't always serve us well as adults. And today, we're taking the next step. Because what do you do when the shame follows you everywhere? Into your work, your relationships, even the way you see yourself? Here's the answer. You face it with vulnerability. That's our roadmap for today. ADHD traits like emotional dysregulation, time blindness, and disorganization are not cracks in our character. They're survival adaptations. And the path to healing them is through shame, resilience, and vulnerability. Stay tuned. This episode is going to reveal exactly how you can break that cycle. So where the shame cycle begin? Where does it begin? Let's start in early childhood. You've got a normal response to abnormal circumstances. Dr. Gabor Maté says, because if a child is stressed like he was or I was, what do you do with that stress? You can't escape it. So what do? The brain tunes it out. But this is happening when the brain is developing, and that affects its circuitry. Think about what happens when a kid with ADHD brings home a messy backpack, forgets homework, or blurts out in class. Too often, the feedback isn't curiosity, it's correction. Teachers say, you need to try harder. Parents sigh, why can't you just be more responsible? Peers label you as the problem kid. When you forget, that gets misinterpreted as you are wrong. And here's something Dr. Gabor Maté points out that really hit me. We often ask, do kids grow out of ADHD? But maybe the better question is, do kids grow out of ADHD or do they just grow out of school? Think about it. Human beings weren't built to sit still for 8 hours a day, lined up behind desks, told to be quiet, and stripped of the chance to move, create, make noise, and express themselves. Those are the things a child's nervous system naturally wants to do. But in school, those instincts are often suppressed. So when a child struggles to sit still, to focus, or to follow rigid rules, is that a disorder? Or is it a perfectly normal reaction to an unnatural environment? Maté suggests that in many cases, we're actually creating an artificial problem by forcing kids into environments that don't honor their developmental needs. And once they leave those settings, once they're free to move, explore, and build lives around their strengths, many of the so-called symptoms fade away. Instead of adapting the system, we choose the easy path and adapt the child. And that often takes the form of drugs.
Back when I was in high school, mental illness and like ADHD was still deemed as an excuse to not sit the fuck down. And it was also used as like as a bad label instead of being like you have something that makes it a little harder for you to focus on certain things. And makes it a little harder for you to fit in into your crowd, into the crowd of people that you want to fit into. So I haven't really experienced it, but if I would have, I would want them to feel safe and comfortable. Because we don't have that nowadays when it comes to individuality, when it comes to like mental problems like that.
It's just like a label.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't kind of use that as real. Because they, coming up with schools, they always say all of us don't learn the same. So in the same way, it could be a mental condition. It could be a learning disability as well. Just when I can't learn to sit here. Like we got to do something to make it interactive. So that I can remember it because it had my whole body moving, just not just one part. Or, just the broad aspect of like the whole learning experience was very stationary.
Be careful.
Very stationary and like well fitted, but then they say, well, everybody learns the different. But then don't take an effect of ADHD and like, oh well, he doesn't sit down and pay attention. But it's like it's boring.
Especially speaking from experience and having learning disabilities and having a rowdy environment around me and not being able to sit there and focus on what I'm learning because I gotta sit there and focus on trying to tune out all the other noise and loud outbursts other students have.
Teachers were supportive for the most part, but Also, I feel like they are, at least when I was in school, they were a little limited as far as how much they can interact with one kid. I mean, we would be in a classroom with like 20, 25 students, and at that time there weren't a lot of like teacher assistants, so there wasn't really like a lot of one-on-one. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like the teacher would do what they had to do, and then we would break out into groups, and then only time they would kind of like jump in is if like grades came out and they noticed like a kid was failing, and then maybe they had to reach out to mom or dad and like, figure it out kind of thing. But as far as like a day-to-day, there wasn't really like, I don't remember a whole lot of one-on-one.
So there wasn't like a lot of like shaming in that, or did you feel like you could be vulnerable around these teachers? Or?
No, because I feel like there wasn't really a lot of time for that.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't really a lot of time for like showing your emotions. It was like, get the information, make sure you got it. If you don't, talk to me later.
Yeah.
But we got to kind of keep the ball rolling. Like, we don't have time for that. Yeah.
So if they had like more space, you feel like that could have been a better experience for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like if maybe they had like one-off like rooms where they can take like some kids that were like maybe not catching on as quickly, with someone who specialized in like helping those kids to get up to par, and then maybe like bringing them back, or even maybe just like leaving them in the same room, or maybe like pulling them off to the side. But I think it's really important to try to like keep everybody, at the same level. And if you see that some kids are falling behind, and then identify to pull those kids to the side to get them up, and kind of try to correct that in the classroom, and not so much leave that to the parents. Yeah, it is up to the parents to do that at home as well. But I think like if that starts in the classroom, it just helps with everything at home as well.
Okay. Psychologist Brené Brown defines shame as the intensely painful feeling of experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And for many kids with ADHD, school becomes a shame factory. I know for me, this was incredibly true. I still struggle with feelings that I am unworthy of love or belonging. And honestly, that has been something that it took me a long time to really get to the core of why I acted out and why I continue to be how I became the person that I was. And it was it was incredibly eye-opening. But I needed help to get there. I needed to really do a lot of exploration and forgiveness and acceptance along that journey of like, okay, this behavior isn't a good thing to do. Like, this is a character defect. Like, my impatience, my, always needing to try to have control over a situation. And the more I tried to control something, the more frustrated I got, and this created this anger. So if you feel that same path, you're not alone. You're actually right where you need to be. So shame is different from guilt. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Going from I did something bad to I am bad. Shame is highly correlated with depression, addiction, violence, aggression, eating disorders, and suicide. For women, it can be these unattainable, conflicting, competing expectations about who they are supposed to be. And for men, it's simply this: I cannot be perceived as weak ever. Here's where the cycle forms. Each time we fail to meet the impossible standard of being neat, on time, focused, or calm, shame deepens. We internalize that we are the problem, not the environment, not the expectations of us, but us. Let's get real about shame. Brené Brown says shame is the most powerful master emotion. It's the fear that we're not good enough. For those of us with ADHD, we don't just flirt with shame, we swim in it. Forgetting an assignment, zoning out in class, running late again, those moments weren't just mistakes, they became evidence. Evidence that we were lazy, irresponsible, just too sensitive. Emotional dysregulation? That's when our big feelings were dismissed as overreacting. Time blindness? Brushed off as not caring. And disorganization? Interpreted as not trying hard enough. So when adaptations get mislabeled, let's unpack three of the most common ADHD traits that get misread. First one being emotional dysregulation, which isn't talked about enough. For many of us, our big feelings weren't welcome. Maybe you heard, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Or you're overreacting. She's just overreacting. Over time, you learn to mask or shut down. Dr. Maté points out that when the child's authenticity threatens attachment, the child will suppress that authenticity to maintain the relationship. That's not weakness, it's survival. It's it's that need to preserve that relationship because what else can you do other than think I'm the one that's wrong? Because if it's any other way, that reality becomes impossible to deal with. The next one is time blindness. It's not about being careless. Neuroscientist Russell Barkley explains that ADHD involves difficulties with time perception and an internal sense of time. But for kids raised in unpredictable or stressful environments, the nervous system itself becomes trained to survive chaos, not to plan calmly. You're not broken. You were rewired by the stress in your life and your environment. And finally, disorganization. On the surface, it looks like laziness, feels like laziness, but as trauma expert Peter Levine reminds us, trauma is not just an event. It's the experience of being overwhelmed with no resources to cope. That's why it can hit differently for everyone. What someone's perception of trauma may be just another event for somebody else. That's why we've got to be careful about, when we label somebody as being weak or they can't handle that, probably I would say that is the truth, that they really can't handle that. And we've got to just believe that what they're saying is true. And giving them that validation is such a huge step to growing a relationship and a bond with each other that gets deeper. A child growing up hypervigilant, constantly scanning for danger, has no bandwidth left for neatly filing papers. That clutter wasn't carelessness, it was protection. So you don't know what somebody's holding on to because they may not even know what it is themselves. So paying clear attention not only to yourself but others is such a huge key to getting better with this. These so-called defects are adaptation. They're masks. They were ingenious solutions for a child trying to survive disconnection, trying to stay in the family tribe, no matter what that cost. Because what was the alternative? The trouble is, they don't always serve us once we're grown.
So
Yeah,
grades don't determine how smart you are.
yeah,
It's all a system,
yeah,
just like the justice. All a system,
yeah,
and it's all a system to make you push harder, but it doesn't take into account on how the person feels going through that process.
yeah,
Because especially for me, for like, I wasn't a type of person that got good grades in school. I came to school every day and worked hard as I possibly could.
yeah.
And then once I saw my grades, it's like it doesn't
Yeah, the
show
motivation's
the
not
hard
there.
work, and you lose motivation, and you start to question like, what the fuck is the point at this point?
Ooh, I don't know. I think one of the phrases I remember distinctly was some kid called me pizza face, and that
Pizza face,
hurt
wow.
my feelings really bad. I used to have really bad acne when I was a little kid, so I used to have like dark spots, definitely being like darker skin tone, melanin reflected. You know, those acne spots can leave like a lot of scarring, and so he would just like say I had a pizza face, and that really hurt my feelings.
That's terrible. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like that happened to you.
Yeah,
Um,
I appreciate it.
did you feel that your natural energy, creativity, or curiosity was like kind of repressed?
Honestly, no, because looks never really affected like my confidence. I always knew I was like a smart kid, and I was like always, I wouldn't say like above the rest, but there was definitely something there. And my mother, she's like educated woman, and always taught me to like love myself no matter what. So even throughout like the whole time that I did have acne, those like it didn't affect me to where like it affected my confidence. Like I always knew I was
That's
gonna be
good.
somebody. You know, I always tried to be the best I can be. I never like sunk into like a depressive state about it or anything like that.
You had like a really good support system
Oh, yeah, for
with
sure.
your
My
parents.
mom, she went to school for psychology, so she
Okay.
was always like, "You're going
That's
through this
good.
phase of life, and this is what you may be feeling, and maybe like think about this." And you know, we were big on like meditating. We went to church all the time.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
And
definitely.
did your school, like the school system, support you in this way as well, or?
Well, so I'm an 80s baby. So when I went to school, there wasn't a lot of support with teachers or like principals as far as like, like helping me have confidence or something like that.
Yeah, like helping you through these
No,
situations.
it was just more
or-
like just education and things like that. I think I got most of that from like home and like my community and my family, my friends, the people that were close to me. It definitely poured into me. My church, my faith, believing in God. All that.
It is very tricky to be vulnerable because then you have to have people that takes that vulnerability in a considerate way
Yeah.
and doesn't take it and throw it in your face, which is why it's kind of hard nowadays to be vulnerable.
So yeah, I remember feeling such shame about who I was. And you know, that that led me to want to hide who I am. I even went so far as like I can remember staying in the bathroom, like hiding out in the bathroom during my breaks, during like lunch breaks, um because I just didn't want to face people. I didn't feel like I was worthy of having friends because of the earlier trauma in my life, because of the lack of connection with my father. And I really had to explore that because that continued to trickle into my life. Like I wouldn't let people in, get too close to knowing who I really am. And there's still a sense of like these barriers of how close I let people be, and some of them are for good reasons, but like if you're pushing people away, you may want to take a look at why you're doing that, because there's a lot that can be explored in that, and there's some healing some real healing. The shame cycle. So why does this hurt so deeply? Because shame isolates. Brown explains. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. That's exactly what happens to ADHD kids. We keep quiet about the chaos inside. We mask, pretending we're fine, and we judge ourselves before anyone else can. This is what the cycle looks like. We make a mistake, feel shame. Feel shame, then mask or hide. Hide, lose connection. Lose that connection, feel even more shame. So that just keeps growing and growing and growing over time. And if that sounds familiar, here's the good news. Brown also says, if you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive. That's where vulnerability comes in. Vulnerability is the courage to show up and be seen, even when we can't control the outcome. Brown says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they are never weaknesses. For ADHD, vulnerability looks like this: saying out loud, I struggle with time. Admitting to yourself, I need reminders. And confessing to someone close, I feel ashamed when people call me lazy. These are just a few of the things that you can explore. And every time we choose vulnerability over hiding, we break the cycle. So I know that one big breakthrough was when I was talking about the trauma, and I didn't understand what trauma was. And neglect can actually be a form of trauma that goes unspoken, and I talked about the time, shared that with a good friend of mine on how, I cried in front of my dad, and I can't remember the real reason why, but I remember the reaction that he had. And I expected, him to have empathy and hug me and tell me it's all right. But all I got was just this look of disappointment. And, that really struck with me. And I believe that's the reason why I can't cry today. That I feel, like I can't be vulnerable, like for the longest time. And when I was able to open up about that and see that, and my friend telling me that that is a form of abuse and trauma, now that I'm exploring it deeper, it really makes a lot of sense about like how I became the person that I am, because I needed to be held and hugged and accepted in that moment. And I wasn't given that. And we all need that. We all need to feel like we belong, because that's how we survive. That's built into us. And that's a good thing, to feel like we belong. And you should be part of communities where you feel like you belong. And those communities contain a lot of vulnerability. And I know that because of my personal experience with being vulnerable and the power that it has.
It depends if your child like is in private school, obviously, or if they're in, DCPS public school. We have charter schools. My kids have been in charter school and public school, and I do notice a difference in like the curriculum. So I think that's just really up to you as a parent to kind of like do your research.
Actionable practices for shame resilience. So, how do we do this in daily life? That's a good question. Here are 3 vulnerability practices from Brené Brown's work that you can start out today. Reach out instead of retreat. Next time you mess up, forget the appointment, lose your keys. Your instinct might be to hide. Instead, tell a safe person, say, hey, I dropped the ball and I'm feeling a lot of shame about it. Like, there's no way that they're going to judge you for that, especially when you open up. Like, they're probably going to, most people will be like, no, you shouldn't feel bad about that. That happens to the best of us. You know, connection is the antidote. Second one is talk to yourself like you talk to a friend. Brown says, if we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. The same goes for self-talk. Instead of, I'm an idiot, try, that was hard, but I'm still learning. Or I did better than the last time. The way we talk to ourselves is as important in how we show up for others. Because if we can't show up for ourselves this way, there's no way we can show up the way we need to in our other relationships. So body check-ins, a few times a day, pause to notice your body. Am I tense? Is my jaw clenched? The awareness helps break the autopilot of old trauma loops. Just notice if you're breathing, like your shoulders are tight, if your breathing is shallow. Just really be aware of your body, or start to check in and just breathe. Just take a few breaths. Ask yourself, is it really that important? Or what's the rush? Whatever you can, inject curiosity into that situation. And here's a bonus one. So you can practice small daily truths. Vulnerability doesn't have to mean spilling your darkest secrets. It can be as simple as, I actually don't understand this, or I need more time. Every small act of honesty builds resilience. Just being open that you don't know is huge. And a lot of people don't do that because they feel like it shows that they're weak or they're stupid, which is actually the opposite of it. When you ask for help, people admire that. People see the strength in that, and you will too. So today, we called out the shame. We saw how it shows up in ADHD, and we explored how vulnerability, choosing to be seen, even when it feels scary, is the way to begin to loosen shame's grip. And remember this, you're not broken, you are adapted. And that takes resilience. And vulnerability is how you turn those adaptations into strengths. But here's the thing, the story doesn't end here. Shame didn't start with us. Many of our parents were carrying their own shame and trauma, and without even realizing it, they passed it down. And then there's the bigger story, how ADHD got tangled up in the pharmaceutical industry, shaping just how we're treated, but how we see ourselves. Shaping not just how we're treated, but how we see ourselves. Here's where I want to leave you with a challenge. Don't just listen. Try this out for yourself. In my self-discovery journal, I've created prompts to help you notice when shame shows up, how you talk to yourself in those moments, and what happens when you choose vulnerability instead of hiding. I want you to commit to trying at least one of the shame resilient practices we talked about, naming it, reaching out instead of retreating, or practicing one small daily truth for 1 week. Just 1 week. It shouldn't be hard. And then let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear your results and your reflections. And if you're ready to go deeper, I also offer my free one-on-one strategy coaching call where we can unpack your ADHD patterns and create personalized tools for you to move forward. You can book anytime at youradhdguy.com. I'd love to speak with you. And don't forget, you don't have to do this alone. Every Saturday night on TikTok, I will host the Kindness Circle Live, a space where you can come share your stories, whether they're about kindness you've witnessed or struggles where a little kindness could have made a difference. Just follow me on TikTok at ron.solo1 and join us. Because here's the truth. You are not broken. You're adapted. And every act of kindness you extend to yourself is a step forward, rewriting your story. And next week, we're going to zoom out. We'll talk about the shame that didn't start with us. It often started with our parents who carried their own unhealed wounds. We'll explore generational trauma, how it gets passed down, and yes, we're going to talk about the role Big Pharma has played in shaping the ADHD narrative. It's going to be eye-opening, and you won't want to miss it. So until then, remember, vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's a path back to yourself. And as always, subscribe. And able to, provide that space for your children to be more vulnerable about, what's going on in their life.
Oh yeah, we always have talks. Yeah, we're gonna go have dinner on our rooftop and go have a talk tonight. Actually,
Awesome.
We do like check-ins. I'm always checking in with their feelings, and things like that. I give them the room to express those feelings, like things that they may not like that I even do. Because even as a parent, like I'm an adult, but like we make mistakes too. So just like being open to hear that, but also making sure they understand at the end of the day I'm the parent. You know what I say goes, but giving them that room to express those feelings.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is very important.
Like maybe
making sure they do it in a respectful way.
that you're working it as a team.
Yeah. It's like, you
That's
always
awesome.
want to make sure like everything in your home is like your happy place and everybody's on the same page and everybody's helping one another.
Yeah.
There's no drama in the house. Like I got like crystals all over my house. I'm absorbing negative energy. I'm saging. I'm everything.
That's awesome.
So
That's
it's like,
awesome.
yeah, for sure.
Well,